Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I'm joined here by a very special guest. She's been a LMT for 25 years. She's the San Diego study group leader. She's assisted in multiple seminars, and she even has her own myofascial release practice known as San Diego Myofascial Release. It's my honor to introduce Shannon Whitall. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So I had met you for the first time in women's health when I had taken it for the first time. And I remember for me, being a guy, my knowledge of anatomy and all the stuff that happens down there was very limited. And I remember feeling a little bit anxious about it, but I had forgotten to bring some pads and I was a little bit nervous. I was kind of caught off guard, and you were like, hey, you could take some of these pads. And from that, we had connected. And so when I had repeated women's health for the second time, I made sure to get a bunch of pads so that if anyone had forgotten theirs or didn't know to get them, I was there to give out some free pads to ease a little bit of that anxiousness. And I do have to say that was because when I had taken it for the first time, you were generous with the pads that you had brought.
Yes, I do remember meeting you and that person. Actually, we had a friend in common, it turned out. What a small world. And I think that it's not surprising because most men, even, therapists, don't really have a great knowledge of the opposite sex down there. So I think you were in good company.
Everyone was very warm and welcoming, and it definitely added to the experience. The friend we have in common his name is Ellis Kantrowitz, and I just happened to interview him on the previous episode. So shout out Ellis. We love you. And so with you, Shannon, can you just give us an introduction to how you got into myofascial release in the first place?
Yes, actually, I specialized in therapeutic deep tissue massage for about 13 years, and I loved it. It was great. But I would say towards the last couple of years of that, I started to grow more and more frustrated with the lack of real results. Like, I wanted people to actually heal and get better. And I felt like they were only just feeling good for a couple of hours, and that's nice, but like I wanted so much more than that for them. And so I thought there's got to be something out there. I didn't know what, I didn't really know where to start looking, but I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school to become a physical therapist. And I started looking into that, and I was like, you know what? That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money. It's a big investment all around. And I don't know if it's going to work any better. So I kind of dragged my feet a little bit. And long story short, is actually a God thing. This brochure came in the mail, and maybe I had seen it 100 times before, but wasn't really ready to see it just yet. But when I saw it then, I was like, wow, this John Barnes myofascial release thing kind of looks like what I might be looking for. So it was just the perfect timing. It's like the perfect storm of events. My kids were at the right age where I could go away for a couple of weeks and do an intensive series of seminars. And I went with the intent of this is going to be something great that I add to my tool belt. And when I got there, I was completely blown away / freaked out a little bit because it is definitely different than anything I had ever seen or experienced before. But after a few days, it all just kind of started to make sense. And I was like, wow, the level of healing that I saw, and not just physical healing, but like emotional and mental, like trauma release that I saw come through this work, and that it's so gentle and nothing was ever forced. And I was just like, there is no way in good conscience that I can ever go back to doing massage. Like, you can get one of those anywhere, but this is so special and so unique, and you can't find it everywhere. So when I went back after that intensive series, I went back home and to my practice, and I told all my clients, I'm like, I'm not doing massage anymore. We're going cold turkey. And if you've ever trusted me, try this a couple times. If you don't see what I see, I will happily recommend you to another therapist. I think I lost like 2 or 3 clients, and the rest is history. It's just been 11 years of just huge growth. And I mean, this work, it speaks for itself. It's next level. It doesn't just stop at treating one aspect of the body, not just the bones, not just the muscles, not just the physical, not just the emotional part. It gets the mind and the body to work together in a way where there's just whole healing, and it's incredible. Incredible.
I
Yeah.
think we all share the same sentiments, those of us who have gone further along into this
Yeah.
work. Because it's one of those things where once you feel the difference, that's the key thing that differentiates, I feel, myofascial release from a lot of different courses or seminars that I've taken. It's you feel this difference. Now, it sounds like for you, you are a quick learner and you said, hey, this is something important. I'm going to quit everything I did before cold turkey. And you're even confident enough in yourself to say, hey, if I lose patience, it'll be fine. And hey, just give this a shot. And if you don't feel what I feel, I'll gladly refer you out. Now, did you have any fears about that? Or are you just like, hey, I know this is going to be super important for me. And so therefore, I'm going to take this just based on that whim. Or did you kind of have to talk yourself out of letting go of your old practice?
That's a great question. For me, I was actually just so excited. And I think when I am sold on something and when I get excited, I can't help but talk about it, and it's contagious. So for me, I didn't really have a lot of fear around it. I was just like, let's do this. And I'll tell you what, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I I see some other therapists who, everybody's on their own journey and everything. I get that. But if I could give like the biggest piece of advice, I look at these other therapists, some of them, and they're trying to wean their clients or their patients off of, massage or off of this. And, well, let's do 50-50 myofascial release and massage. You know what? It just ends up being dragging on and on and on. And years later, they're still trying. I'm like, just cut it off the head and like launch a whole new thing. I mean, this, again, it's not something that you can find just anywhere. So once people experience it, I mean, it's just going to take off. So yeah.
I completely agree. I'll say that I felt like I was one of those people where I felt like I had one foot in, one foot out. And it's because I had identified with what I went through, which was physical therapy school. So
Yeah.
paid a ton of money to learn and get our licenses. And it's very tough to let that go.
Mm.
But I think what you have, whether intuitively or maybe it's just your personality type, you said, hey, I felt this excitement towards it and I knew that it was something special. So why not just go all in versus
Yeah.
where I had to kind of take baby steps and baby steps. And then once you get to the holy land, so to speak, of just using myofascial release with all tissue work, where you're like, this is so much easier on my body, the patient or client is getting the
Yeah.
results beyond anything else that I've ever learned. Now I can kind of live by these principles in my mind, body, and spirit. And I'm not playing this tug of war in my own head that really is the barriers that you put on yourself. And I
Right.
think that's great advice. But I'll also add that if you are someone who maybe is scared to go all in and maybe you need to see some results
Yeah.
before you can take that next step, that's totally fine. But
Absolutely.
But if you're smart like Shannon, then hey, jumping all in and doing this work that you feel called to do is going to lead you to the places that you want a little bit faster. But remember, it's not a race. And as long as
Right.
you get there, that's when you get there. But I'll say that for me, I could have saved myself a lot of frustration and headaches if I would have just kind of followed my intuition, which was leading me in this direction, instead of holding on so tightly to the things that I've learned or the experiences that I had. And it's kind of all a journey, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
Now, something
Absolutely.
something that you had said was it was almost like a act of God that you had
Uh-huh.
gotten a brochure that I've heard that, John sends these brochures out to every massage therapist who graduates massage therapy school. And you kind of said like it was kind of an act of God where maybe you saw it for this particular time that it resonated with you. Can you share with us what that experience was and how it felt?
Well, gosh, we're gonna open a whole new can of worms there. They're really nice worms though. So they're the kind that you put in your garden and they turn trash into wonderful things. They're not the bad kind. So let's see. So I am a very faith-filled person. I'm a Jesus freak. I love him. In fact, it's actually one of the he's actually one of the main things that sets my practice apart from, I think, so many other practices because I'm not operating out of my own strength or intuition. It's very a spirit led. And the results that I get through that, I mean, not just for my patients, but even for myself, are life changing and incredible and so inspiring. And I mean, the miracles that I see happen with people, I'm like, yeah, the work is great, but it's like something even more than that. And so, yeah, it's kind of my secret sauce, my secret weapon. Not so secret anymore. But going back to what you said earlier, just a quick little side note when you're like, oh, if you're smart like Shannon and just dive all in, I don't know if it's smart or if it's just a little crazy. And I also have a lot of that. I'm definitely an adventurer. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just see what happens. There we go.
And then you got this brochure and you said, "Man, this is something that God has sent me. There's
Yeah.
something here."
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I find procrastination is a good thing and, kind of dragging your feet a little bit, at least for me, has saved me from making a lot of mistakes since I am such an adventurous person and I can, just kind of jump all in. I think also that procrastination comes from the Lord a little it saved me from I'm like, wow, I'm really glad I didn't jump in on that because look at what happened. And yeah, so when I was dragging my feet on, okay, should I go to PT school? Should I, what am I gonna do here? And just kind of had it in the back of my mind. And then this brochure shows up and I was like, what is this? Like it was almost just like it was just dropped in my lap and highlighted. And it was like as I read through it, I was like, yes, these words are just jumping off the page for me. And it was like I knew that I had to go check this out. But gosh, when I got there, like and I told you I was like, what is happening here? I was like, there is some serious like spiritual stuff going on here and people screaming and looking like they're getting exercised and like what is happening, God, I feel like you brought me here, but what in the world did I so we had some words, he and I just felt like after that I had a lot of peace. And once I kind of knew what my purpose was, what my mission was, I was like, oh, okay. And then I felt like as I went back into the classroom, which was the unwinding class. And for anybody who's taken that for the first time, it can be like really intimidating or kind of scary at first because you're like, what is this? People rolling all over the place, some running around barking like dogs. Like what did I just walk into? But yeah, I felt like I was standing on just a tiny little island with the palm tree with the breeze gently going through my hair while there's like this giant storm of like craziness all around me. So I just had so much peace from that moment on out. I was like, okay, let's do this. I know I've made the right decision. I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. So yeah.
What a great feeling. I think a lot of times we don't feel like we're in the right place, or we feel stuck, or there's environment that's like kind of toxic or something like that. So for you to be in this environment where it's kind of chaotic around you, but it's kind of like a hurricane. And John mentions this, where if you feel like you're in the eye of the hurricane, it's very peaceful despite everything around that's happening. And
Hmm.
I will say that, you kind of leave it up to quote unquote procrastination, but I think you're at this period of life where you're uneasy and you're trying to figure out consciously with your head or your brain of mind saying, hey, what am I supposed to do next? And something about God is you can come up with a plan, but he'll direct your steps. And I think as you were open to looking for this next chapter, it came to you. I'm in a chapter of life where I am developing my own relationship with God, and it resonates. I think I had spoken to Sister Bernadette, shout out Sister Bernadette, who was a former nun, but she very much talks about how this unwinding process, this class that we learned, and the process of unwinding is like prayer for the body. It's very
Oh,
intimate
yeah.
and you're letting things go. And so I love that you shared that. And so for anyone who has yet to take this unwinding or has yet to see it, often it can be a little bit jarring because it's very different than what we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time that I saw it, I was also jarred and felt uneasy about it because the only way I could describe it was it looked like someone was having an exorcism on the stage.
Yes,
And people
exactly.
are screaming and hooting and hollering around you. And for me, coming from a physical therapy background where most of our continuing education courses are like didactic, like there's a long lecture, you're just sitting still in your chair taking notes. For it to be kind of controlled chaos was so different for me. And it
Yeah.
goes to show that how long I've come. And so if you stick with it and you learn that, hey, that's actually what authentic healing can look and feel like. And so what is it in you that feels uneasy about it? Is it because
Mhm.
you grew up in an environment that said healing is supposed to look this particular way, like, meditation or nothing unwinding like? So
Right.
and
So
then with
calm.
yes, calm and we follow these protocols and this is supposed to happen. Unfortunately, what I've learned through firsthand experience is a lot of the stuff that we learned in physical therapy school doesn't get the results that we're told that we're going to get, like ultrasound or electrical stimulation or all these things. I think very much like you had experienced in massage therapy school, where you said, the results that I was getting from my clients only lasted a day or two. And I knew that
Mhm.
there was something more. And I think with myofascial release, because it really does treat your mind, body, and spirit, it allows you to let go of whether that be emotional traumas or physical traumas that keep you in these locked up patterns and affect not only the way that you hold yourself up, how you feel, and even how you process the world. Now, with your I'll say with your spirit that you had talked about, and just as a quick note, John never says that myofascial release is a spiritual practice. But without him saying that, you can't help but align the two because they teach very much a lot of the same things. How has your spiritual practice influenced your myofascial release?
Well, one of the big things is I don't know if you ever experienced this as a physical therapist, but as a massage therapist, one of the main concerns or issues that comes up within the community is they feel like they take on a lot of what their client or their patient is carrying or releasing, and so they have this like heavy emotional and spiritual like baggage within themselves all of a sudden that's not theirs, or they start feeling this pain in their body that maybe they're their client had. And I actually think that's very spiritual and not the good side of it. I've never had to experience that, praise the Lord, because yeah, those things can't get on me. And I never really had to think about it or like even pray about it or ask that. It is just like I have just this invisible shield that everything just kind of goes over me and I'm able to like pour out without taking in. But I have to be grounded. I have to be just grounded in my faith and grounded in Jesus. And I just have a lot of joy in what I do. I do have to be careful to not overdo it with myself, not push myself too much. I have to have healthy boundaries with how much I work and how much I give. Otherwise, I can begin to get drained. So I think it's very healthy for everybody to, know how many clients are good for you in a day. And you can make an exception here and there, but stick with that, honor yourself, in that you want to be able to practice for as long as you can. So take care of yourself, get treated. I need to listen to that myself. I definitely don't get treated as often as I should. But also, it's okay to take a break. I set a goal a while back, and I'm so glad that I finally kind of made it to this point where I try to get away from work at least once a month, whether it's for like 3 or 4 days or whether it's for a week. That has been my goal, and I've been able to do it for the most part. I miss a month here and there, but it's so nice, and I can just come back like revived and just like excited again, and it translates through my work.
I love that. I think something that you have kind of designed for yourself is a way to live life in the way that you would like. Can I ask how many patients do you see in a day?
For me, I just see four, whether that's for 60 minutes or for 90 minutes or a mixture of both. Four is my happy spot.
I
Yeah.
love that. Okay. And just know that if you are in myofascial release and you're starting up your own practice, it's not about a egotistical number that you think, hey,
Right.
this is what makes me it seem like I've got a full schedule. I love the number 4. For me, it's around 5. I
Right.
can do 6, but I like to stay around 5. Now, in
Yeah.
physical therapy, where we get stacked with multiple patients an hour, it's not uncommon for someone to see 20 patients in a day, which I'm just like
Yeah.
completely drained. And how good
Yeah.
of quality care can you really provide? And I do feel like it's because it's the business side, the things that I said don't work, like ultrasound or electrical stimulation. I think those devices are sold to allow you to stack multiple patients. But as a physical therapist, you get burnt out. And then you figure out a different way if you're lucky. But because everyone's doing the same thing, you're like, I guess this is what I signed up for. And so what I love about your practice is you can say, hey, this is as many patients as I'm comfortable treating, 4 per day, which
Mhm.
for most physical therapists, you're like, how do you do that? Not only is that a number that's comfortable for you, you have a thriving myofascial release practice to the point where you can say, and in addition to that, I want to be able to take off at least once a month. That just helps me recharge and reset and get
Yeah.
centered and grounded again so that when I come back to work, I can give my best to the clients that I
Yeah.
serve. And that is probably an impossible dream to most physical therapists. And so
Mm.
just going to show that like what your practice should be is sustaining a life that you want by your design. It shouldn't be measured by anybody else saying, oh, so and so sees whatever 10 patients per day, and so that's what I need to see. It's not. It's what
Yeah.
is it that's going to make you feel fulfilled and happy so that you can be joyful in life. Now,
Yeah.
something that you had shared is, I guess in massage therapy school or licensed massage therapist, talk about taking on other people's energy and they feel that, right? And
Mhm.
I've had this experience, but my story around it is very different. And so I had a clinical instructor in physical therapy school, His name is Arturo Valle. Shout out Arturo. He's in Rehab United in Escondido, so not too far from San Diego.
Oh, yeah, that is very close.
And he had shared with me, he said he woke up one day with a ton of back pain. And he said, I have this gift. They say that if you're a healer in my heritage, he was Mexican, that you
Mhm.
can feel other people's pain. And so he said, this isn't mine, and so just be prepared. I want you to treat me first to see where I'm tight and what you need to release. And then there's going to be a patient that comes in and it's most definitely going to have the same symptoms of low back pain. And I was like, I'm not sure if this is right, but I trust you in your work. And then lo and behold, like a few hours in the afternoon rolls by and there's a new patient, low back pain, exactly where he had felt it. So I had treated him there and he felt a lot better. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess it's a mark of a healer to be able to feel other people's pain. Now, here's the importance of staying grounded and centered, because if you are not, then when you take on other people's pains and their emotions or whatever they're feeling, it can be very overwhelming. And if you are an empath or you kind of feel into those things, you can kind of get lost into it. Whereas for me, I feel like I'm very grounded and centered, especially when I'm treating. I kind of let my hands guide me or whatever intuition guide me. And so
Yeah.
when I feel those emotions, it's almost an ability for me to see, one, if they're hurting in a particular area, I'm like, ooh, I bet this is something. And 9 times out of 10, when I move to that spot, even if it's not anywhere where they're complaining of, they'll say something like that. Like if they're in for low back pain and I'm like, ooh, I feel like something's in their shoulder because I'm feeling something in my shoulder, I'll treat it there and they'll be like, you know what? I don't know if you know this, but that's actually, I'm feeling that into my back. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's all connected,
It
And
is
so
all connected.
and so for me, the story that I say to myself is, oh, it must be a mark of a healer to feel that. But also remembering to stay grounded and centered. Otherwise, you get lost in it. You can't decipher what's yours and what's theirs. Whereas when you are grounded and centered, I can say, ooh, this isn't mine. So it must be theirs. And how can I use this information to facilitate their healing process? Now,
Yes.
I have other colleagues who will do little rituals to make sure they clear themselves of maybe these
Mhm.
energies from patient to patient. And I see that you're nodding your head. So, is there anything that you do to allow yourself to, whether it be clear energies, stay grounded, make sure yours is yours, or anything along those lines?
Thankfully, it's not something that I have to think about. I was nodding my head because I know a lot of people who in the community who do that, whether it's like saging a room or, sound wave therapy or whatever. For me, I think just again, staying grounded in the Holy Spirit. I every morning I have my time with him and it's great. So you were talking about the mark of a healer being that, and an empath, and you can feel that I can definitely pick up on like an emotional climate, that might come into the room or, just a heaviness or whatever. I can definitely discern that, but it's almost like in a way of like reading a book or watching a TV show. Like it's very like I see it, but it's not like on me. I'm not a part of it. So thankfully, it's just, it's not again something that I have to really think about or so I never want to take that for granted because that is a gift in itself to be so effortless about it. And I'm grateful for that. But as far as, like, well, how do you know where to go and all that stuff? I mean, that's a question that we get all the time in myofascial release. Well, how do you know where to start? And like the answer is you don't. But sometimes just start anywhere and just see where it leads. In fact, I don't know if you can see. I'm going to adjust this. There's my little plaque up here. It says, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really well." It's kind of my motto in here. You just kind of start somewhere, and it's like, what is that ancient philosopher? Is it TZO? So, or I don't know how to say it, but it was like every journey begins with the first step, right? So We just take the first step and we go from there. And the intuition, again, I feel like I just get downloads from the Holy Spirit of like, okay, go here. Or sometimes I'll just be talking to the person and my hands are like, just on them, treating somewhere. And I wasn't even, oh, okay, here I am. You know what? I'm just going to stay here and see what happens. And then all of a sudden things start happening and it's just really cool. It's such an adventure every day. Every day is just like, what is going to happen today?
I love that. I love that. I know that when I first started learning myofascial release, I was very Channel 5. Obviously, coming from a physical therapy background, I was asking like, where do you put your hands? Or is the direction of pull? And it's not until you feel it that it's like their bodies will guide you, and I remember thinking like, how do you know where to go next? And that's such a Channel 5 Aunt Sally question.
Yeah.
And it's wherever you feel like you're supposed to go. And that question though is thinking, your conscious mind. And so I love that little quote that you had said, like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I don't know, but I know I'm doing it really well. It's like a deep
Yeah.
knowing and a feeling. And I think that's because you're able to follow your intuition, and that's really your subconscious, and John has said, and I've read studies, your subconscious mind works at like 10 million to 1. So whatever you can perceive consciously is just a drop in the ocean. Whereas if you can let go of that and be like, okay, well, let me see where the tides are taking me, and
Yeah.
it's this ability to let go of control. And that's very tough for so many people to do. But when you do that, yeah, it's like your hands are just kind of guided. And when someone asks me, like, how do you know? I'm like, I don't. I'm just kind of following, right? And so for
Yeah.
anyone who's new into myofascial release and they're like, I haven't developed this intuition. I don't trust the way I feel. One, recognize, hey, you're in channel 5, right? And in channel 5 and channel 3, just to remind my listeners, if you're new to the podcast, channel 5, you want to think of it like your left brain. It's logical, linear, often critical, impulsive, and where fear tends to be. Whereas channel 3 is your right brain, and it's more of your creative, intuitive, imaginative side. And things are often communicated in pictures or colors and things of that nature. And that's where love is supposed to be. And so John teaches us to stay in channel 3. And it's not one or the other. I think as we grow up into adults, we get influenced by, current events, the news, and oftentimes those are very negative. And all he's saying is trust your intuition. Let go of the things that you know or your experiences and see where life leads you, because ultimately that is where we're supposed to be. And when you consciously think otherwise, you can often get let down or led down these paths that don't truly resonate and are on your path. Now, in the context of what we were talking about, it's like, where do you know where to go? You don't. All you know is one step. And as long as you're taking one step at a time, then eventually you'll get to your place. But the channel 5 is, how do I get to this destination? Who cares about the journey? I need to get here fast. And that
Right.
oftentimes will lead you into places that are impulsive, and it's not where you're supposed to be, and it's you convincing yourself. And that's the power of the mind, because people can convince themselves any one or which way, it doesn't matter. But how you feel about something is truly how you feel about something. Now, on that topic, I think I'm early in my Christian life, so maybe you can shed some light on this. And it's almost like, you can read about these lessons in the Bible, but until you live these principles out, you don't feel the Holy Spirit. Just like myofascial release, where you can take a seminar and you say, okay, John, man, he's speaking all these things that resonate. I know they're true. And then you go back into your normal life and you live by the channel 5 that you were brought up in. How do you
Mhm.
make that transition fully, not only to understand on a psychological level, but to feel it on I would say, a heart space level, to live out these principles?
In regards to faith or myofascial release?
I would say, can you shed light on both? Because I feel like
Okay.
they're the same principles, but they are applied to different things.
So not allowing fear to govern you. to govern your thoughts, to govern your actions, to stop you from doing things. Fear is an enemy. And you know what? I don't want to hear what he's got to say. You just get behind me. Intentionality is a big thing because in the Bible, it says, those who seek will find. And so when I am intentionally seeking, I find, and so I'm being intentional in my mornings. Like I give my first words of the day are good morning, Holy Spirit. It's like the equivalent of, getting dressed and putting on your makeup for the day. I'm not just going to roll out of bed and show up to work. Like, no, in addition to taking care of my, physical appearance, I also have to take care of my heart and spirit. And that's part of my preparation for the day. And I do that intentionally. I go and I seek. It's been a big difference because I actually only started being really committed to that. I made a commitment to do it every day for 90 days. And if I was 1 minute late, I would start all over again. You know what? I had to start over twice. I started this back in February and I still have a month to go. But I'm like, okay, you know what? Because even starting over, it's just that much more time. And I've gotten to, and I'm still getting to know him so much more intimately. And just the change in my life is affecting others around me. It's affecting my marriage. It's affecting my husband, my kids. I see the changes in them. I see the change in my business. Just, it's just like, it's like opening these floodgates where it was blocked before. And now just like blessing is pouring through and my clients, they benefit from it. There's like a whole nother level of anointing to the gift of healing that I've been given. And it's a beautiful thing, but it really has to be intentional. You have to pursue it and you have to be committed to staying, gosh, what's the word? Regular. I'm having a brain fart. Persistent, consistent. So and I think it's the same way in the myofascial release world. Because when I first started doing this work and I first came back from those seminars, I was like, yes, let's go. And, you come from that environment of this giant classroom full of like over 100 therapists. And it's like this amazing bubble and you all are on the same wavelength and all that and amazing things are happening. And then go back to your little treatment room and you're all alone and you're like, I have all these questions. I don't know who to ask, but you know what? You just do it and you fumble your way through it. I feel like that's the title of the book. You just do it and you fumble your way through it. I think John Maxwell, he's a great author and a great speaker. He writes a lot of books about leadership and he teaches around the world on leadership. But he has a book called Failing Forward. And even just the title, I mean, the road to success is paved with failure, so you fall down, you get up and you learn. And sometimes you have to fall a few times to learn the lesson. Hopefully you learn it, sooner rather than later. But yeah, so just being intentional, not giving up, being consistent and knowing what you're going after and not letting fear get in the way.
I love that. I've been one of those people where I've even raised my hand to ask John. I'm like, when I take a seminar and I'm around all these therapists in this community, that it's easy for me to live through my heart space and trust my intuition and explore things and be creative. But then when I go back to my regular life, it's like that environment isn't the same. And I asked him, like, how do you make that transition? He said, one, the fact that you're aware of it is the great first step. And
Yeah.
then what you have to do is you can't care about what other people think about you. It's like I had a fear of judgment of others. And to be honest, it's taken me a long time to work through this, but it's not really a life to live. And once you can live in your own authenticity, even if it's like, yo, I'm a little weird. I do this myofascial release thing and it looks like I give people exorcisms. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's like, hey, I help them, like they are able to get results that they've been searching out for years, And so even though it looks a little bit crazy, quote unquote, just because we haven't seen it, it doesn't mean that it's not helping. And once you're able to share your gifts and especially build a life off of it, if this is something that you feel called towards, what a wonderful life where you get to constantly be present and intentional with the things that you're doing. Build a life where you're not fearful of judgment, where you can start to let go of all these different fears that you might have, insecurities, all these things that come up with it. And being new with something, it just takes practice, and just like you
Yeah.
said, it's about like failure is going to be part of it,
Yeah.
but how you define failure and how you respond to it makes all the difference. Because I think for me, academics being a huge part of my life growing up, yeah, there's a fear of failure, and starting a business where you hear like there's gonna be failure. That became my own barrier that I had to work through. And then once you
Mhm.
kind of reframe it as like, sure, it's quote unquote a failure because it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, but hopefully you learned something. And so just because you fail on Monday doesn't mean that you fail on Tuesday. Just
Yeah.
because you fail on Tuesday doesn't mean you fail on Wednesday. As long as you keep it moving, you obviously, if you feel the feelings that come along with that and don't just brush it away, but you feel it and then you say, okay, at least I learned this lesson. It didn't work. Maybe I need to tweak some things and then I can move forward. I think sometimes people think, you have to have this plan that's all built out and you have to know
Your 10-year
exactly what
plan.
to do. Yes. Whereas like in reality, you just have to have the courage to start. And then, yeah, like, are there going to be challenges and obstacles in the way? Sure. But that's what gets it to be where you're very proud of what you've done because you know the challenges and obstacles that you've gone through. You know what it took to get there. And when you make it and you're like, yeah, I treat 4 people a day and I get to take a time per month off. Like that's what makes it worth it. I think a lot of times people are scared of stepping outside their comfort zones and then so they don't grow. And so just know when it's uncomfortable where you might see something as a failure, you can learn and grow from that. And that is part of the process. I think there's never going to be a successful business owner who has never had to go through hardships and failures. Like you said, it's just part of the journey. But if you can kind of reframe it and say, you know what, it's not the end of the world. And, I have another day to try again. And you'd be surprised at what you piece together. Even for me, like this podcast wasn't always at this level. And I've just been able to add a little piece here, a little piece there, and it's continuing to grow. So, do you have any lessons on business that you could share that maybe for someone who's scared to start?
Well, going back to what you're saying, just on what I tell my study group students as far as failing, like in myofascial release, the great thing is that you you can start in an area that may not be right, but it's never going to hurt them. It's going to do some good. So don't get too much in your head about it. As far as business goes, I'm going to just put this bluntly, not everybody is cut out for it, and that's okay. You don't have to be. I think a lot of people tend to get into it because they're like, well, I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to keep all the money for myself. And like, that's where I started. I was like, exactly that. I'm like, I don't want just 50%. But once you start your own business and you realize all that it takes, I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the past decades that I've been like, sometimes just feels like it'd be easier to just go work for somebody else because it's a lot, you don't stop to think about and consider that, you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for your marketing. You're responsible for all the overhead, social media, your website, all the things that go into it. But if you're willing, again, to go on that journey and remember that it's not going to be easy and it is a journey, it doesn't happen overnight. Some people say that success happens overnight, and I don't think that's true at all. It is a journey. And a lot of people who, seem to have overnight success stories, there was actually a lot of work that went in before that. And you're only just catching it on on this end. And so it's a lot of, again, staying consistent, being intentional, and not giving in and not listening to the pressure of not just the world saying, why don't you just, give up, but also your own head, in your own head. That voice in your head is like, this is never going to work. And oh my gosh, it's so hard. And just push through, finish the race, like keep going and don't give up. Reach out, listen to wisdom, seek out wisdom, seek out people who have a life, who have a business model that you admire and that you want for yourself, and go talk to them. You know what? You can take all these college courses and everything and business courses, but again, that's just book knowledge. Put in the footwork of going and doing the grassroots way of talking to people, learning, asking the questions, take them out to dinner. I tell my kids this too. If there's something you want to know, just go and ask. I actually learned that again from John Maxwell, amazing author, amazing teacher on leadership. But, don't wait for things to fall in your lap. Don't wait for things to happen to you. Don't wait for it to work itself out. Take the initiative, put in the work to learn how to do it right. And again, fumble your way through it until it hits just right. Ask questions and be open to learning. Have a teachable heart. When you think you know it all, you're already losing.
I couldn't have said that better myself. I think something that you had said that really resonated is, if you see someone that has your business model, then ask them. Because I think early on in my career, or when I was first starting a business, I would just kind of survey my friends and say, hey, what would y'all look for? But they didn't have the business that I wanted. And so that was falling on deaf ears. And the advice that I would get was a little bit ludicrous at times. And, it's like, what do you expect? You're asking someone
Right.
who has an idea for a business. There's
It's
a
like
difference.
asking parenting advice from somebody who doesn't have kids.
Exactly, exactly. There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And once you walk on the path, you realize that you're doing things that you wouldn't have thought to do in the beginning. And just
Mhm.
like you said, it takes a lot of, patience, perseverance, and consistency, because overnight success, often there was, I don't even think that exists unless you like hit the lottery. But even then,
Yeah.
like a lot of lottery winners go bankrupt,
Yeah.
even these, professional athletes who make millions in their contracts, a lot of them will go broke after 4 or 5 years out of their sport. And the thing that comes to mind for me is there was a smartphone game called Pokemon Go, and it was like an overnight success. They had everybody walking outside catching these Pokemon. And when they asked the creators, like, how does it feel to have this overnight success? They said, it was an overnight success 10 years in the making. They had
Yeah.
failed so many times, but they never gave up. And it just took this chance moment for it to actually culminate into something that blew up. I
Mhm.
happen to be reading Ecclesiastes. It's a chapter in the Bible,
Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes. And there's a little section, I don't know it quote by quote, but it says, like, it's not only the strong who go to war, or the wise that get paid, or this and other. It takes time and chance, and I think in every business owner's life, yes, you're going to have to work hard and be diligent and quote unquote till your land, but there's going to be an
Mhm.
element of luck, and luck are favored to those who are prepared for it. It's like, you want to be putting in the work so that when you get your break, you're prepared for it. You don't want to be, not doing anything, have your lucky moment there and not be prepared for it. So it's like preparing for these moments of luck, but that's going to take time and patience. And then during those moments, you're going to have these fearful thoughts of like, yo, this is a lot of work. Man, I'm putting in all this extra work and I could just be getting a, $15 an hour job and be making more, because in the beginning, it's the toughest for a plane to take off in the beginning, and so
Yeah.
that's why there's all these fears. You're looking for direction and guidance and you don't know where to go. But once you take off and you get to altitude, then you can glide. Then you could take a
That's
month,
so good.
you
Mhm.
take once a month off and hey, business is going to be fine because I've put in the work. So, and then that kind of also resonates with myofascial release. Those of us who are new to it, where you're like, I don't know where to start. How do you know where to go? All these fearful thoughts, these channel five thoughts. It's like, one, I always just ask my patient, like, hey, where do you feel like needs attention to start? And that's a
Mhm.
starting point. And then
Yeah.
one, it gets them involved. And two, you know where to start. But then where you go from there is kind of where you're guided. And you can always ask your patient, you want to make
Mhm.
sure that they're involved and you're doing MFR with them. You're not doing it to them. So
Right.
if they're just laying there and expecting you to do all the work, it's not going to work the same. You're very
No.
much in this partnership together. And as long as they're committed to the work, then it'll work. You can only help someone who wants to help themselves. And if they're not that, whether it's business or a client, it's like you have to be willing to do that part for yourself, and then you find the guidance and the path unfolds for you. Now,
Yes. I
I'm going to change gears a little bit because, I've gotten to meet your family, and you had just mentioned Noah had just graduated from high school. Congratulations. What a
thank you.
great step in his life. And something that came to mind because, I think sometimes it's easy for us to live out these MFR principles when we're in a seminar, when John's energy is kind of culminating in the rooms and we can feel his presence, his essence, and the work. And then we go back to our lives and it's not always the same. Now, sometimes our partners are instrumental in our lives. I'm sure that John, your husband, has had an influence on your business. My partner Yvette, she's been instrumental in my business. How do you help them see the work that we're doing if they don't understand it?
Well, my husband and I have been married 26 years this past February. And so he knows me pretty well that I'm kind of sometimes a little bit of a wild card, little hummingbird that's just like beep, 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 beep. And so, and he's definitely the steady rock, he helps keep me grounded. Otherwise I'd be floating up off into the clouds and living up there in rainbow land. But there's also reality. So he's always a little more pessimistic, as most people are with this work, whether you tend to be a glass half empty kind of person anyways. But he is definitely open when he watches to see, okay, is this something that's real? Is this something that you're really believing in? I'm watching how it affects other people with you. And then he'll be like, okay, I'll try it. And then once he tried it and once he saw results in himself for the first time, then now he's my biggest advocate. He has his own business doing pest control, but he's handing out my cards, and go see her. Oh, you have a problem. Oh, she can fix it. I honestly don't even know how to explain it, but just try it. And yeah, I've had quite a few of his customers end up coming to me. I think it's that level of trust too, trust between partners and them wanting the best for you and them believing in you. And of course, my success means his success as well, and vice versa. So, but when it can be genuine excitement over something, authentic, then I think it all just works together to create something wonderful that spreads.
I couldn't agree more. I think it is a lot to run a business. And I remember before I had met Yvette, I would run workshops and it was draining because you're having to set up, you're having to get people to sign in, pass things out, run the workshop, and then do the follow up and do all this process. And I remember that she was with me, whether there was one person at the workshop or more than 20. And just having her presence there helped me
Yeah.
with my anxiousness and my anxiety. And there's no other greater person that I could see with this. Now, the thing that we often get in trouble with, and I don't know if you could share this, is we're very different, and something that we often get into conflicts about are our differences. But when we have a shared goal to work towards, our differences become our strengths because we
Yeah.
see it from two different lenses. And I do truly feel like we're unstoppable in those moments. Do you feel like because John is different now, you said he was a little pessimistic, but he's your supporter, he's your rock.
Yeah.
You feel like because there's a difference there that it helps, or would you say, hey, maybe two myofascial release therapists would tackle this just as well?
No, I definitely believe that there should be a difference. I mean, if you're both the same, it can get kind of boring. Like I love and also hate how the differences challenge me, but it's important because it causes me to grow. The Bible say iron sharpens iron, and I feel like the disagreements we have, because we are different, are actually necessary and have been necessary to my success and also his success. Where I don't have certain qualities, he comes in and he fills in those gaps. And where he doesn't have certain qualities or strengths, I come in and I fill those gaps. And so we are like this team. Again, like you said, if we're moving together, especially towards a common goal, it's so much easier. But it's like when when you're divided, that's where it becomes hard. So back to intentionality and being consistent about touching in and making sure that you guys are headed in the same direction. But you were talking about how just having her there, whether there was one person at the workshop or multiple, just helped to calm you, because we were made for relationships and we were made for companionship. And doing something alone is almost never as fun as, or successful as when you team up with somebody. It can just be so much more successful. And I know there are introverts, and my own daughter, she's just, loves to just work alone. But even she needs the support, from time to time, and she has to check in and get that encouragement. And so having somebody there to encourage you and to lift you up when you're tired, and just not to be cliche, but kind of be that wind beneath your wings. Like, we need community, and that's so important. And you can't surround yourself with, I mean, the most successful world, or most successful people in the world, don't surround themselves with people like themselves. They surround themselves with people that are going to challenge them and bring new ideas to the table, and bring different strengths. So where you're hitting a glass ceiling, their strengths can take you up here, to break that ceiling. So together, working together is just so much better. You get places faster, and it tends to be more successful in the end.
I will trust you on that, Don't get me wrong. Yvette has been a great partner. She's an engineer, and so her mind processes things very differently. And it's honestly the best thing when we're in alignment and we have a common goal. But when we don't have that common goal, our differences are like, how come you can't be like me? And that's kind of where we fall into this trap. But it's all a process, I'm sure, you've
Yeah.
been married for decades, and we're just starting our relationship, but hopefully, we get to the same place, and it's just learning from you and saying, hey, those differences become such a important role, because if there's two of the same people, one person's not needed. And I
Yeah.
need to
That's right.
remind myself that if when we are working together and conflicts arise, I do need to be able to honor her and the way that she processes things, because she does things at a very high level that I'm
Yeah.
super amazed about. It's just sometimes when it's not the way that I want it, like I need it this way, holding on to my own beliefs, that I kind of fall into some trouble. So thank you for
Yes.
sharing that. In
Yeah.
total agreement. Do you have any last things that you would like to share with my audience?
I think just touching base on that last topic for a minute, I think one of my favorite analogies of why we need each other is why we need different people in our life is the example of camping. Like, I love to go camping. I love exploring, and hiking. And, we've hiked together and the adventures that you can have there. And it's all about the experience and this and that. And we're going to stay overnight. We're going to roast marshmallows. We're going to be under the stars and you're going to go see this and that. And I get so caught up in the vision and the experience and planning that part of it. But if it were just me, I'd get there and I'd be like, I didn't bring any wood. I didn't bring a lighter. I didn't bring a can opener, all those details. And he's the detail guy. He's like, he has like a growing list of, just all the things that, we need. And I need that in my life. I need somebody to point out like, well, did you consider this? When I was looking for a new location for my clinic, he was like, well, what about the parking? And, what about this? And I was like, I didn't even think about that. And I'm like, I think we'll figure it out. But it's good. I need him to bring those things to my attention because these aren't things that I naturally think about. And, he alone by himself can get too caught up in details and just like, talk himself out of things because he's thinking about all the details and the perfection of everything. And I'm just like, it's gonna work out, and he needs my, blind faith sometimes and encouragement that it's just going to be fine. Look, it always has been, and so we really bless each other that way and drive each other crazy at the same
time. Shout out, John. All right, cool.
Yes.
Now, how do people find you?
Okay, so we are located in San Diego, La Mesa. San Diego is really big, really, really big. So we are located in La Mesa and we're online. We're on social media, Facebook and Instagram. And in San Diego, Myofascial Release, you'll find us. We have a great website and I'm actually in the process of updating and building an entire new one. That's coming soon. Building it myself. Again, one of those things as a business owner, MFRSanDiego.com, or you can myofascialreleasesandiego.com. Any of those will get you to where we are. You can also contact us, send us a text. Do you have any questions? 619-977-5671. And probably don't send me an email. I'm going to confess, I'm horrible at emails. You will not get a reply right away.
Shameless plug. I actually help myofascial release therapists create their own websites. So if you need any help, that is definitely something I do and happy to do. I just want to say thank you so much, Shannon, for being open and honest with us. I know I got a lot of golden nuggets from you and your experiences, and I'm sure that other people who are scared to start or have fears around it have learned very valuable lessons from this episode.
And Unu, thank you so much for having me on. It's just been a pleasure. And can I just say, I'm so proud of you. You are just such a great orator. I've been really impressed during this whole thing just with how smoothly and effortlessly you change in between topics and ask questions. And you're just a great host. So thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.